Good to see you. Yeah, nice. Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Good evening. This is part 2 of this month's study titled Grace, Truth, and Courage in the Practice of Yoga. Grace, truth, courage. These are all important touchstones or virtues in the yoga process or path. Principles that we can draw upon when making life choices. And it seems to be kind of the bulk of what the life process really is making one choice after the next. It's kind of the crux of Bhagavad Gita in some ways, right? Like Arjuna's like, now what do I do? And we're all asking that question moment to moment, and sometimes there's more cataclysmic events that bring that question to the surface. Now what do I do? And so the idea is that we can learn about or reflect on, yogic virtues or principles so that we can make more enriched or informed choices in life, which is constant, non-dual. And specifically today is called Truth in Yoga Practice. And I hesitated with the title a bit. I didn't want to sound like too ostentatious or like, hello people, here comes the truth, I'm the bearer of truth or something, like, I really, like stake claim to the, it gets a lot of people in trouble, right? Right, and like, that's how religious cults are born. Right? So I'm trying to avoid that temptation. So maybe we pull back a little more objectively here and kind of reference a few historical principles. So in Sanskrit, the word for truth is, who knows what that means? Yeah, Sat, or I'm thinking of Patanjali's rendering we call Satya, or the practice of exercising truthfulness. And in the yogic context and view, what we regard as truth is their standard is that it's the highest standard, the highest possible standard for truth is that it's perennially true, that it's whatever we're proposing is true is always true under all circumstances. And how many things can you say about, how many things can you say that for in this world or life, that it's always true? Like, what is that constant? What is that continuously true? And as I reflect on my own view, it's largely subjective truth. It's my opinion or my judgment, or it's true in this instance, but sort of true in another instance, right? Is it perennially true? Like, so how I feel about an individual, say, my wife or my friend or my neighbor, like all that is, shaded with my personal biases. I mean, I love my wife very much, but I just hold that particular view of her, right? It's not the same, Angie doesn't have that same view, or Pasha doesn't have that same view. It's like a relative So the yogic standard is hello, welcome. Is something that's perennially true. And what can we say that about? I mean, this is just a little thought experiment here. I'm asking, like, what's perennially true? I guess. Love, okay. And simultaneously, there's a lot of subjective sense, like, of what love is, right? Like a codependent love song, for example, right? Like, I can't live without you, I never will be, you know, is that love? Right? But I feel you, brother. I know you're, I feel you. What else could we say is true? Yeah.
I mean, there's some unchanging constant identity that I experience as me.
Ah, okay. So a constant spiritual identity? Or just
There's something you could say that.
okay.
If we're saying the spirit is
Okay.
eternal.
All right. And within this sense of self, kind of ongoing self, it kind of fluctuates, it wavers, it goes up, down. Sometimes I'm more identified with this thing, or I'm more identified with that thing, and so forth. But there is sort of like a continual sense of self that occurs. Okay. Changing sense. Hello, welcome. Any other sort of postulations out there? Yeah.
The sun is coming up every day
Okay.
without that.
Yeah. So like rhythms in nature.
Mm,
Will that always be true?
Probably not, but.
Yeah, for the foreseeable future.
From our perspective, I guess it's still subjective because it's from our.
Yeah. And there was a time when the sun wasn't there. And you know, it's kind of come in like, so anything within the phenomenal realm of nature, or the universe, or the creation is subject to one perennial truth, and that is like continual change and modification. So that we know is true. That everything on one level or another is continually modifying or adapting. And you know, this feels like kind of a deeper lean in and to say something like, you know, Purusha, something that's constant, something that's changeless. And yoga proposes that there's a changeless dimension to life or the creation or beyond the creation as well. And that's something we can explore our relation. And we're a part of that continual mind changing force or Purusha or spirit, or whatever we want to call it. Purest of love is the kind of dimension or way that we try to qualify what that might be, that changeless spirit. So that's an exploration, right? So we have this finite mind trying to, you know, a sea of limitless change. And now how do we like attune this vessel to hear something that's perennially true or infinitely true? And that's a life's work. Back to Patanjali, this definition of satya or truthfulness, as he prescribes it as a practice, right? Like a virtue you can develop, both in deed, right, in your actions, as well as, and this is the most apparent, is in your words. So whether one is speaking truthfully or not speaking truthfully, and in mind or in thought, right? Being, you know, and that requires continual self-reflection. Am I viewing this circumstance, say there's some conflict, right? Am I viewing this truthfully or accurately, or is it colored, this conflict, colored. Invariably within conflict, you'll find your own personal biases being superimposed upon the situation, the other person, etc. So we can use truthfulness as a method of self-reflection. Is that really true? Yeah. And in words, it's fairly evident, but we can also be truthful or untruthful rather by omitting to say, by omission, by not saying certain things. Or let's say we just remain silent and take credit for something. All right. So that would be a form of untruthfulness, say. Or the lies of convenience. Well, I don't want to hurt the person's feelings or something like that. I mean, you have to weigh these things out. Yoga requires a great deal of ongoing and refining and refined discernment, right? Starting to tease apart one's own egoic investment in a situation, weigh that up against some more universal truth, weigh that up against dharma. It requires ongoing level of sensitivity and refinement, and to notice how attuned or not attuned we may be to a principle of truthfulness. I close this out with a little story. It's my most recent love in learning is just by absorbing myself in listening to stories and the wisdom that they hold. So it's from Mahabharata. And boy, how do you tell that briefly? There's 5 princes, and they're all brothers. And their name are the Pandava, we call them. The Pandava, the 5 brothers. And they're very virtuous, and they're very kind of righteous. And the most righteous of the 5 brothers is Yudhishthira. He's the oldest. And another name for Yudhishthira is Dharmaraj. He is the epitome of dharma or virtue or truthfulness in many ways. The man cannot tell a lie. He's never spoken a lie in his entire life. Dharmaraj, king of dharma, or universal virtue, universal principle. Most insightful, intelligent, astute, virtuous person. Well, he had a couple of vices, but that's where the conflict comes in, right? The story doesn't end with, and he's such an amazing man. And that's what you need to know, right? So there's always some element of friction that makes its way into these stories, right? So, Yudhishthira's one vice is gambling, specifically dice and like this. And so he has a little encounter with the dice game, and things escalate and fast forward a lot, and there's now this very confrontational war between the Pandava, the 5 brothers, their armies, and the Kaurava, this corrupt forces. And they're going at it for days. This is old school war, right? You line up and you get all your elephants and you sharpen up everything and you just go at it like this. There was some virtuous etiquette to the war as well. There's some ground rules that everyone's supposed to follow. Some of those ground rules started to get tested and not adhered to. So I believe it's the 13th day of the war, and it looks like the Pandava have got to do something different. they've got to change their game plan. And so their spiritual counsel, Krishna, turns to the Pandava and says, I got an idea. The captain of the other side, Drona, he has a son, and his son's name is Ashwatthama. And Drona loves his son, like any father would, right? Intimately. So Krishna sees that this is like a weak link and to exploit it. Also on the Kaurava side, there's an elephant. And the elephant's name is Ashwatthama. So he orders Bhima, I believe, one of the Pandavas. He orders Bhima, go slay the elephant Ashwatthama. And Drona is then going to come to Yudhishthira, Dharmaraj, when he hears that Ashwatthama has been killed on the battlefield. He's going to come to Yudhishthira. He's going to ask him, is it true? Has my son, Ashwatthama, been killed? So sure enough, Drona comes up to Yudhishthira. Tell me, is Ashwatthama dead? He says, yes. Ashwatthama hata. Ashwatthama's been killed. And then at that very moment, Krishna gets out his conch and meanwhile, Drona in the background saying, the elephant, Ashwatthama, is the one who got killed. Just kind of snuck it up. But up to this point, it said that Dharmaraj, Yudhishthira, so virtuous and pure that he hovered just an inch off the earth, so elevated. But in that moment, he fell to the earth. He lost his virtuous power. Okay. Now let that story just echo in you, right? Dissect or comment or, so forth. Just kind of consider our exchange at the beginning of our study of yoga, really, and see how it echoes through you through coming time. It's kind of an intense note. The whole speech, but we got this, friends. So in practice, what we're going to do is, that there's no real substance. I mean, your real yama, niyama, they're more intended. Satya is more intended for like off the mat, right? Just how you navigate life and make decisions and stuff like that. But what we can do on the mat to kind of help that bridge is just create more space for like stillness and presence, as well as attuning to a pure quality of sound. Like nonsensical babble, YouTube doom scrolling, right? There's less truth to that quality of sound than a meaningful conversation. There's more truth in a meaningful conversation. Or like, say, therapy, right? Where you're getting even more truthful, right? And even more refined than that could just be like the purest quality of sound. And so the sound we'll use is Om. And you'll just see that it just clears you out and you're just more present to this kind of abiding, established sense of self and as that relates to truth. Yeah. All right, friends, let's come to the front of our mat then.